Welcome back to the Everything is Energy channel for the KYBALION book read, Part 8. Chapter 11, Rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The KYBALION. The great fifth hermetic principle, the principle of rhythm, embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, a to and from movement, a flow and inflow, a swing forward and backwards, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and a low tide. Between the two poles manifest on the physical, mental, or spiritual planes. The principle of rhythm is closely connected with the principle of polarity described in the preceding chapter. Rhythm manifests between the two poles established by the principle of polarity. This does not mean, however, that the pendulum of rhythm swings to the extreme poles, for this rarely happens. In fact, it is difficult to establish extreme polar opposites in the majority of cases. But the swing is ever toward first one pole and then to the other. There is always an action and reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking, manifested in all of the airs and phenomena of the universe. Suns, worlds, men, animals, plants, minerals, forces, energy, mind, and matter, yes, even spirit manifests this principle. The principle manifests in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, and life history of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. Beginning with the manifestation of spirit of the all, it will be noticed that there is ever the outpouring and the indrawing, the outbreathing and inbreathing of Brahm, as the Brahm's word. Universes are created, reach their extreme low point of materiality, and then begin their upward swing. Suns spring into being, and then their height of power being reached. The process of retrogression begins, and after aeons they become dead masses of matter, awaiting another impulse which starts again their inner energies into activity, and a new solar life cycle is begun. And thus it is with all the worlds. They are born, grow, and die, only to be reborn, and thus it is with all the things of shape and form. They swing from action to reaction, from birth to death, from activity to inactivity, and then back again. Thus it is with all living things. They are born, grow, and die, and then are reborn. So it is with all great movements, philosophies, creeds, fashions, governments, nations, and all else: birth, growth, maturity, decadence, death, and the new birth. The swing of the pendulum is ever in evidence. Night follows day, and day night. The pendulum swings from summer to winter and then back again. The corpuscles, atoms, molecules, and all masses of matter swing around the circle of their nature. There is no such thing as absolute rest or cessation from movement, and all movement partakes of rhythm. The principle is of universal application. It may be applied to any question or phenomena of any of the many planes of life. It may be applied to all phases of human activity. There is always the rhythm swing from one pole to the other. The universal pendulum is ever in motion. The tides of life flow in and out according to law. The principle of rhythm is well understood by modern science and is considered a universal law as applied to material things. But the Hermetists carry the principle much further and know that its manifestations and influence extend to the mental activities of man, and that it accounts for the bewildering succession of moods, feelings, and other annoying and perplexing changes that we notice in ourselves. But the Hermetists, by studying the operations of this principle, have learned to escape some of its activities by transmutation. The Hermetic masters long since discovered that while the principle of rhythm was invariable and ever in evidence in mental phenomena, still there were two planes of its manifestations so far as mental phenomena are concerned. They discovered that there were two general planes of consciousness, the lower and the higher, the understanding of which fact enabled them to rise to the higher plane and thus escape swing of the rhythmic pendulum which manifested on the lower plane. In other words, the swing of the pendulum occurred on the unconscious plane, and the consciousness was not affected. This they call the law of neutralization. Its operations consist in the raising of the ego above the vibrations of the unconscious plane of mental activity, so that the negative swing of the pendulum is not manifested in consciousness, and therefore they are not affected. It is akin to rising above a thing and letting it pass beneath you. The Hermetic master or advanced student polarizes himself The Hermetic master or advanced student polarizes himself at the desired pole, and by a process akin to refusing to participate in the backward swing, or if you prefer, a denial of its influence over him, he stands firm in his polarized position and allows the mental pendulum to swing back along the unconscious plane. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery accomplish this, more or less unknowingly, and by refusing to allow their moods and negative mental states to affect them, they apply the law of neutralization. The master, however, carries this to a much higher degree of proficiency, and by the use of his will he attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of those who allow themselves to be swung backward and forward by the mental pendulum of moods and feelings. The importance of this will be appreciated by any thinking person who realizes what creatures of moods, feelings, and emotions the majority of people are, and how little mastery of themselves they manifest. If you will stop and consider a moment, you will realize how much these swings of rhythm have affected you in your life, how a period of enthusiasm has been invariably followed by an opposite feeling and mood of depression. Likewise, your moods and periods of courage have been succeeded by equal moods of fear. And so it has ever been with the turning the page. And we are on page 74, Rhythm. Excuse me for the delay. We're back reading now. And so it has ever been with the majority of persons. Tides of feelings have ever risen and fallen with them, but they have never suspected the cause of reason of the mental phenomena. An understanding of the workings of this principle will give one the key to the mastery of these rhythmic swings of feeling and will enable him to know himself better and to avoid being carried away by these inflows and outflows. The will is superior to the conscious manifestations of this principle, although the principle itself can never be destroyed. We may escape its effects, but the principle operates nevertheless. The pendulum ever swings, although we may escape being carried along with it. There are other features of the operation of this principle of rhythm of which we wish to speak at this point. There comes into its operations that which is known as the law of compensation. One of the definitions or meanings of the word compensate is to counterbalance, which is the sense in which the Hermetists use the term. It is this law of compensation to which the KYBALION refers when it says the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The law of compensation is that the swing in one direction determines the swing in the opposite direction, or to the opposite pole, the one balances or counterbalances the other. On the physical plane, we see many examples of this law. The pendulum of the clock swings a certain distance to the right and then an equal distance to the left. The seasons balance each other in the same way. The tides follow the same law, and the same law is manifested in all the phenomena of rhythm. The pendulum with a short swing in one direction has but a short swing in the other, while the long swing to the right invariably means the long swing to the left. An object hurled upward to a certain height has an equal distance to traverse on its return. The force with which a projectile is sent upward a mile is reproduced when the projectile returns to the earth on its return journey. This law is constant on the physical plane, as reference to the standard authorities will show you. But the Hermetists carry it still further. They teach that a man's mental states are subject to the same law. The man enjoys keenly is object to keen suffering, while he who feels but little pain is capable of feeling but little joy. The pig suffers but little mentally and enjoys but little he is compensated. And on the other hand, there are other animals who enjoy keenly but whose nervous organism and temperament cause them to suffer exquisite degrees of pain. And so it is with man. There are temperaments which permit of but low degrees of enjoyment and equally low degrees of suffering, while there are others which permit the most intense enjoyment, but also the most intense suffering. The rule is that the capacity for pain and pleasure in each individual are balanced. The law of compensation is in full operation here. But the Hermetists go still further in this matter. They teach that before one is able to enjoy a certain degree of pleasure, he must have swung as far proportionately toward the other pole of feeling. They hold, however, that the negative is precedent to the positive in this manner. That is to say that in experiencing a certain degree of pleasure, it does not follow that he will have to pay up for it with a corresponding degree of pain. On the contrary, the pleasure is the rhythmic swing. According to the law of compensation for a degree of pain previously experienced either in the present life or in the previous incarnation, this throws a new light on the problem of pain. The Hermetists regard the chain of lives as continuous and as forming a part of one life of the individual, so that in consequence the rhythmic swing is understood in this way. while it would be without meaning unless the truth of reincarnation is admitted. But the Hermetists claim that the master or advanced student is able to a great degree to escape the swing toward pain by the process of neutralization before mentioned. By rising on the higher plane of the ego, much of the experience that comes to those dwelling on the lower plane is avoided and escaped. The law of compensation plays an important part in the lives of men and women. It will be noticed that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. If he has one thing, he lacks another. The balance is struck. No one can penny and have, excuse me. No one can keep his penny and have the bit of cake at the same time. Everything has its pleasant and unpleasant sides. The things that one gains are always paid for by the things that one loses. The rich possess much that the poor lack, while the poor often possess things that are beyond the reach of the rich. The millionaire may have the inclination towards feasting and the wealth wherewith to secure all the dainties and luxuries of the table, while he lacks the appetite to enjoy the same. He envies the appetite and digestion of the laborer, who lacks the wealth and inclination of the millionaire, and who gets more pleasure from his plain food than the millionaire could obtain, even if his appetite were not jaded, nor his digestion ruined, for the wants, habits, and inclinations differ. And so it is through life. The law of compensation is ever in operation, striving to balance and counterbalance, and always succeeding in time, even though several lives may be required for the return swing of the pendulum of rhythm. Number 12, causation. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law, the KYBALION. The great six hermetic principle, the principle of cause and effects, embodies the truth that law pervades the universe, that nothing happens by chance, that chance is merely a term indicating cause because existing but not recognized or perceived. That phenomena is continuous, without break or exception. The principle of cause and effect underlies all scientific thought, ancient and modern, and was enunciated by the Hermetic teachers in the earliest days, while many and varied disputes between the many schools of thoughts have since arisen. These disputes have been principally upon the details of the operation of the principle, and still more often upon the meaning of certain words. The underlying principle of cause and effect has been accepted as correct by practically all the thinkers of the world worthy of the name. To think otherwise would be to take the phenomena of the universe from the domain of law and order, and to relegate it to the control of the imaginary something which men have called chance. A little consideration will show anyone that there is in reality no such thing as pure chance. Webster defines the word chance as follows. A supposed agent or mode of activity other than a force, law, or purpose, the operation or activity of such agent, the supposed effect of such an agent, Turning the page. Excuse me for the pause. We're going to page 78. Back reading. The operation of activities of such agent, the supposed effect of such an agent, a happening, fortuity, casualty, etc. But a little consideration will show you that there can be no such agent as chance, as in the sense of something outside of law, something outside of cause and effect. How could there be a something acting in the phenomena universe independent of the laws, order, and continuity of the latter? Such a something would be entirely independent of the orderly trend of the universe, and therefore superior to it. We can imagine nothing outside of the all being outside of the law, and that only because the all is the law in itself. There is no room in the universe for a something outside of the independent, outside of and independent of law. The existence of such a something would render all natural laws ineffective and would plunge the universe into chaotic disorder and lawlessness. A careful examination will show you that what we call chance is merely an expression relating to obscure causes, causes that we cannot perceive, causes that we cannot understand. The word chance is derived from a word meaning to fall, as the falling of dice. The idea being that the fall of the dice and many other happenings are merely a happening, unrelated to any cause, and this is the sense in which the term is generally employed. But when the matter is closely examined, it is seen that there is no chance whatsoever about the fall of the dice. Each time a die falls and displays a sorry, there's a misspelling here. Each time a dice falls and displays a certain number, it obeys a law as infallible as that which governs the revolution of the planets around the sun. Back of the fall of the dice are causes, are chains of causes, running back further than the mind can follow. The position of the dice in the box, the amount of the muscular energy expended in the throw, the condition of the table, etc., etc., all are causes, the effect of which may be seen. But back of these seen causes there are chains of unseen preceding causes, all of which have a bearing upon the number of the dice which fell uppermost. If a dice be cast a great number of times, it will be found that the number shown will be about equal, that is, there will be an equal number of one spot, two spot, etc., coming uppermost. Toss a penny in the air, and it may come down either heads or tails, but make a sufficient number of tosses, and the heads and tails will about even up. This is the operation of the law of average. But both the average and the single toss come under the law of cause and effect. And if we were able to examine the preceding causes, it would be clearly seen that it was simply impossible for the dice to fall other than it did, under the same circumstances and at the same time. Given the same causes, the same results will follow. There is always a cause and a because to every event. Nothing ever happens without a cause, or rather a chance of causes. Some confusion has arisen in the minds of persons considering this principle from the fact that they were unable to explain how one thing could cause another thing. That is, be the creator of the second thing. As a matter of fact, no thing ever causes or creates another thing. Cause and effect deals with merely with events. An event is that which comes, arrives, or happens as a result or consequent of some preceding event. No event creates another event, but is merely a preceding link in the great orderly chain of events flowing from the creative energy of the all. There is a continuity between all events precedent, consequent, and subsequent. There is a certain relation existing between everything that has gone before and everything that follows. A stone is dislodged from a mountain side and crashes through a roof of a cottage in the valley below. At first sight, we regard this as a chance effect. But when we examine the matter, we find a great chance of causes behind it. In the first place, there was the rain which softened the earth, supporting the stone, and which allowed it to fall. Then back of that was the influence of the sun, other rains, etc., which gradually disintegrated the piece of rock from a larger piece. Then there were the causes which led to the formation of the mountain and its upheaval by convulsions of nature, and so on, and infinitum. Excuse me. Then we might follow up the causes behind the rain, etc. Then we might consider the existence of the roof. In short, we would soon find ourselves involved in a mesh of cause and effect from which we would soon strive to extricate ourselves. Just as a man has 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 great-great-grandparents and so on until when, say, 40 generations are calculated, the numbers of ancestors run into many millions. So it is with the number of causes behind even the most trifling event or phenomena, such as the passage of a tiny speck of soot before your eye. It is not an easy matter to trace the bit of soot back to the early period of the world's history when it formed a part of a massive tree trunk, which was afterward converted into a coal, and so on until as the speck of soot it now passes before your vision on its way to other adventures. And a mighty chain of events, causes, and effects brought it to its present condition. And the latter is but one of the chain of events which will go to produce other events hundreds of years from now. One of the series of events arising from the tiny bit of soot was the writings of these lines, which caused the typesetter to perform certain work, the proofreader to do likewise, and which will arouse certain thoughts in your mind and that of others, which in turn will affect others, and so on and on and on, beyond the ability of man to think further, and all from the passage of a tiny bit of soot, all of which shows the relativity and association of things, and the further fact that there is no great, there is no small in the mind that causes all. Stop to think a moment. If a certain man had not met a certain maid a way back in the dim period of the Stone Age, you who are now reading these lines would not now be here. And if perhaps the same couple had failed to meet, we who now write these lines would not now be here. And the very act of writing on our part and the act of reading on yours will affect not only the respective lives of yourself and ourselves, but will also have a direct or indirect effect upon many other people now living and who will live in ages to come. Every thought we think, every act we perform has its direct and indirect result which fit into the great chain of cause and effect. We do not wish to enter into a consideration of free will or determinism in this work for various reasons. Among the many reasons is the principal one that neither side of the controversy is entirely right. In fact, both sides are partially right, according to the Hermetic teachings. The principle of polarity shows that both are but half-truths, the opposing poles of truth. The teachings are that a man may be both free and yet bound by necessity, depending upon the meaning of the terms and the height of the truth from which the matter is examined. We'll be ending here and returning back on page 81 and causation.